Hi everyone, my name is Karen. This is my channel Rather Be Reading, and today I'm bringing to you my Around the Year in 52 Books wrap up for 2019. If you guys saw my recent 2019 reading statistics and goal review video, then you will know that one of my 2019 reading goals was to complete the Around the Year in 52 Books reading challenge. I will leave a link to it in the description box down below. It's basically a Goodreads group that has 52 reading challenges or reading prompts. The general idea of it is that it's a challenge for each week of the year, so you check them off like one by one as you go throughout the weeks. I don't do it like that. I just take all 52 prompts and try to check them off throughout the year. I was successful in completing all 52 prompts over this past year. I don't know why I forgot that word for a second. So I'm going to go through all the 52 prompts that there were this year and what book I used to kind of check them off. I generally won't double up. I try to use a different book for each separate challenge. So let's just jump straight into it and go through. If I'm looking down, I've got my laptop set up down here with my spreadsheet that I used for the challenge this year, where I'll just be going through. Why does my hair look like it's got a white streak in it? Do I have a bald patch? What's going on? Going through the challenges. So let us begin. So the very first challenge was to read a book that was nominated for or won an award in a genre that you enjoy. I decided to choose the Edgar Awards, which is an award named after Edgar Allan Poe, which I believe is for books in the like mystery type of genre. Which like mystery thriller, all that's my favorite genre. So I picked the Edgar Awards and I read Under the Harrow by Flynn Berry, which won the Edgar Award for Best First Novel in 2017. The second prompt is to read a book with one of the 5 W's in the title, like who, what, where, when, why. For that, I read The Girl Who Smiled Beads by Clementine Wamaria and Elizabeth Beale. Obviously, that had who in the title. Next was to read a book where the author's name contained A, T, and Y. Obviously, A, T, and Y is for around the year. They quite often incorporate something with A, T, Y in the prompts, like each year. So I, for that, read Forget Me Not by A.M. Taylor. Obviously, that has the A, well, A in Taylor, the T in Taylor, and the Y in Taylor. Right there, they're all there, kind of together in a little clump, which is nice. The fourth prompt is to read a book with a criminal character, i.e. assassin, pirate, thief, robber, scoundrel, etc. For that, I read Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Obviously, this is a book about a boy training to be an assassin and becoming an assassin's apprentice, so that worked perfectly for that. The next prompt was to read a book by Shakespeare or inspired by Shakespeare. For that, I read Exit Pursued by a Bear by E.K. Johnston, which is inspired. It's kind of a retelling. To me, it seemed like a really loose retelling, but I'm not as familiar with this story. It is a retelling of A Winter's Tale by Shakespeare. And the next prompt is to read a book with a dual timeline. For that, I read I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. The next two prompts, prompt 7 and 8, kind of go together. They're like a combined prompt. So it was to read 2 books related to the same topic, genre, or theme. For those 2 prompts, I used An American Marriage by Tayari Jones and Ordinary People by Diana Evans. These are both books kind of with the main theme, one of the main themes being marriage, and kind of almost the breakdown of marriages in some way. They both also do focus on POC couples, so I used those 2 books to fill those 2 prompts. The next prompt was just to read a book from one of the top 5 money-making genres. The top 5 money-making genres are romance/erotica, crime/mystery, religious/inspirational, science fiction/fantasy, or horror. So basically, you could pick any book for that. I slotted in for that one The Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nyan, which is a YA fantasy. The next prompt was to read a book featuring a historical figure. For that, I used Wolf by Wolf by Ryan Groudon, which does focus a lot on Adolf Hitler. That is a YA alternate history. It is set in a world, it's set in the 50s, but it's set in the 50s as if Hitler and the Axis powers won the Second World War, and she is trying to win a motorcycle race so that she can have an audience with Hitler because she's trying to kill Hitler. So he's quite a prominent like feature in both the two books in that duology. The next prompt was to read a book related to one of the 12 zodiac Chinese animals. For that, I read Blind Tiger by Rachel Vincent. Tiger is one of the Chinese zodiac animals. The next prompt was to read a book about reading books or about an author or / writer. So for that, I used, I got a really itchy eye. For that, I used the Jane Austen Book Club by Karen Joy Fowler. Obviously, the whole premise of that book is a group of people getting together to read Jane Austen's works, like all 6 of her works throughout a year, kind of in a book club. So it's kind of about reading and about books and about an author. So I felt like that definitely fit that prompt. The next one is to read a book that was included on a New York Public Library staff picks list. So there's a whole bunch of lists there that you could pick from. I used the spring 2019 list, and on that list was Sadie by Courtney Summers. Next was to read a book with a title, subtitle, or cover relating to an astronomical term. For that, I used The Language of Stars by Louise Hawes. I thought that stars was a astronomical term. Next was to read a book by an author from a Mediterranean country or set in a Mediterranean country. For that, I used The Angel's Game by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, which is set in Barcelona in Spain, which is a Mediterranean country. Next is to read a book told from multiple perspectives. From that, I slotted in Wonder by R.J. Pleasure. Next was to read a speculative fiction, i.e. fantasy, sci-fi, horror, dystopian, etc. For that, I used 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray, which is a YA sci-fi book. Next was to read a book related to one of the elements on the periodic table of elements. For that, I used Vision in Silver by Anne Bishop, silver being an element on the periodic table. Next, I had a book by an author who has more than one book on your TBR. For that, I used Asking for It by Louise O'Neill because I have 2 Louise O'Neill books, both of which I was highly anticipating on my TBR. Next was to read a book featuring Indigenous people of a country. For that, I read Not Just Black and White by Leslie Williams and Tammy Williams, who are Aboriginal Australians, and that is a non-fiction memoir from them. Next was a book from one of the polarizing or close call votes. So how they select the 52 prompts each year is and you can get involved in this if you join the group. As it gets closer to the end of the year and the new year of things, they have a lot of polls so they'll put a lot of prompts, they let people vote on them, they pick the popular ones, and then they also create lists based on the ones that were either very close or were completely like no-go, like they were a polarizing one where people were like, no way did they want it to be a prompt. So I chose from those lists of polarizing or close call votes, I chose the prompt of a book about a relationship other than romantic. And for that, I read Beautiful Malice by Rebecca James, which one of the main themes and topics of that book is that it's about kind of a toxic female friendship. So I used that one for that. Next is to read a book with a number in the title or on the cover. For that, I read Sizzling 16 by Janet Ivanovich. Next 4 challenges are all tied in together, and they were to read 4 books inspired by the wedding rhyme. So the first one was to read a prompt for something old. For that, I chose The Merciless by Danielle Vega. I chose that because that was one of the oldest books on my TBR at the beginning of 2019. The next prompt was to read something new. So for that, I read A Midsummer's Nightmare by Cody Keplinger. That is the newest book that came in, like the latest book in 2019 that came in that I read in 2019. So I used that one for that. Next was to read a prompt for something borrowed. So for that, I used Lion's Share by Rachel Vincent, which is just one of the books that I borrowed from the library. So I thought that fit. And then the next prompt is for something blue, which I read Blue Heaven by CJ Box, which had blue in the title. So I figured that worked for that. The next prompt is to read a book off the 1001 Books to Read Before You Die list. The book I read for that was Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I should mention that every prompt, there are a lot of lists and guides in the group that you can go and check that give you hints and ideas for how to find books for these. If they say something like read a book off this list, there will be links to the list so that you can go and find the list and all of that. It's all very helpful. You know, they put a lot of work into helping you find books for the topic if you're not sure how to fill a prompt. The next prompt was to read a book related to something cold, theme, title, author, cover, etc. For that, I chose The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. This is a thriller that is set in Scotland during a snowstorm, so I thought that worked. Next was to read a book published before 1950. For that, I chose Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie, which was originally published in 1937. Next was to read a book featuring an elderly character. For that, I read The Widow Next Door by L.A. Detweiler, which is a thriller about an old lady, an old widow, who lives next door to a new couple who have moved into the street. Next was to read a children's classic that you've never read. For that, I chose The Giver by Lois Lowry, which is kind of a middle grade story, which I figured worked kind of in with children's, that I had never read before. Next was to read a book with more than 500 pages. For that, I chose Lady Midnight by Cassandra Clare, which had 669 pages. Next was to read a book that you have owned for at least a year but hadn't read yet. For that, I chose Book of Shadows by Kate Tiernan, which was the first book in the Sweep series. The next prompt was to read a book with a person's name in the title. For that, I chose Claudia and the New Girl by Anne M. Martin, which is one of my Babysitters Club reads that I read last year. The next prompt was just to read a psychological thriller. For that, I chose The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. The next prompt was to read a book featured on an NPR Best Books of the Year list. So I took the 2018 list and I read Pride by E.B. Zaboy. Next was to read a book set in a school or university. For that, I chose The Foxhole Court by Nora Sakovic, which is a series set all around a school sporting team. It's a fictional sport called Exie, but it is set in a school, university, like a university sporting team. Next was to read a book not written in traditional novel format. For example, poetry, essay, an epistolary novel, a graphic novel, etc. For that, I chose We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which is a essay. Next was to read a book with a strong sense of place, or where the author really brings the location/setting to life. For that, I chose The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart by Holly Ringland, which is set in Australia, and a big part of it is set in quite a rural, like outback area of Australia, and it does have a very vivid setting. Next is to read a book that you stumbled upon. For that, I chose What I Saw by Beck Nicholas, which is a book that I'd had on my TBR for ages, but when I originally purchased it, I just purchased it on a whim while I was on a trip at Target. If I recall, I'd been to a big, massive secondhand book sale that had been a bit of a bust, and so I'd gone into Target, and to make myself feel better about how much of a bust the secondhand book sale had been, I just purchased a bunch of books from Target, and that was one of them, and I knew nothing about it prior to picking it up. Next is to read a book from the 2018 Goodreads Choice Awards. For that, I read Vengeful by V. Schwab, which was the winner in the sci-fi category. I think it was the YA sci-fi category. No, actually, that's not YA. Might have just been the winner in the sci-fi category. The next prompt was to read a book with a monster or monstrous character. For that, I chose A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. The next prompt was to read a book related to STEM, being science, technology, engineering, math, either fiction or non-fiction. For that, I chose The Martian by Andy Weir. Obviously, it's a sci-fi novel set in space, and you're following a character who's on Mars, and it's hugely scientific. It's got a lot of scientific stuff in there about how he's managing to survive. So I thought that one would work for that. Next is to read a book related in some way to a TV series / movie you enjoyed, either the same topic, set in the same era, a book that appeared in the show or movie, etc. For that, I read Beloved by Toni Morrison, which is a book that appears on the Rory Gilmore Reading Challenge. The next prompt is to read a multi-generational saga. For that, I read The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Walton, as that features 3 different generations of women in this family. Next was to read a book with a mostly black cover. For that, I read Lady Susan by Jane Austen. I'll quickly throw a picture up of that cover so you can see, but I read the edition, like those Black Penguin editions where it's all black text, all black and then just the white text for the title. So I used that one for that. Next was to read a book related to food. For that, I just read Cherry Pie by Lee Redhead, because obviously a cherry pie is food. Next was to read a book that was a finalist or winner for the National Book Award for any year. For that, I read Far From the Tree by Robin Benway, which was the winner for the YA award in 2017, I believe. Next was to read a book written by a Far East Asian author or set in a Far East Asian country. For that, I read Use the Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang, who is a Vietnamese American author. And it does feature Vietnamese American with like Swedish heritage as well characters, but Vietnamese American characters are featured in there as well. The next prompt was to read a book that includes a journey, be it physical, health, or spiritual. For that, I chose Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. Assassin's Quest, is that the third one? The third book in the, what was that series called? The Farseer trilogy. I just had a mental blank there. In the Farseer trilogy, the third book has a massive like physical journey in it of the characters like trekking to a particular like place to like try to do something, all of that. So it definitely has a journey in that book. The next prompt was to read a book published in 2019. For that, I used These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling. And then the final prompt, the 50-second prompt, was to read a book with a weird or intriguing title. And for that, I chose Marriage of a Thousand Lies by S.J. Sindhu, because I think Marriage of a Thousand Lies is a very, like, intriguing title, in my opinion. So that's it. Those are all 52 prompts and the book that I chose for it. Like I said before, there will be a link to the challenge, to the group down below for the challenge. It is going on for 2020. I would encourage checking it out if you're interested, even if you don't want to do all of them, if you're just looking for a few fun prompts to try and get you going. This year, there are a lot of prompts themed around 2020 and things connected to 2020 or like other eras of 2020. Other areas of the 20s, like there's a like prompt related to 1720 like type of thing. So it's just can be a like fun thing to like find cool prompts and things like that. I really enjoy trying to check off all of the challenges throughout the year, and like I said, I will be, spoilers for my 2020 goals, but I will be participating again in 2020. So yeah, like I said, I will leave a link down below to check out if you guys are interested. So that's it. Those are the 52 prompts and what I use to check off all of them. I would love to chat with you guys if you have any thoughts on any of the prompts. If you thought any of them in particular sounded particularly difficult. There weren't any that were super difficult. The ones that where I struggle a bit more is where I don't already own a book that could fit. For the majority of them, my natural reading just off my shelves and from the library will check off a book. The ones that I struggled with a little bit more were the book by Shakespeare or inspired by Shakespeare. I didn't own anything for that. The National Book Award, I didn't own or like just don't seem to naturally read anything connected to the National Book Award. But for the most part, the rest of the challenges, I can just easily have something on my shelf already that will slot into it. They're very like adaptable challenges, I think. So yeah, I would love to chat with you guys in the comments down below. Like if there's any of these challenges that you thought sounded really fun or really difficult, let me know down below. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more from my channel. That is all I have for this video today. Bye guys.